y'all, I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. We're Real Estate Elevated, and we're bringing you another episode of I'm Moving to North Carolina, Now What? So today we're going to give you 3 tips, and these are for folks who are looking to buy a house, and I'm going to tell you what not to do to yourself. So don't play psychological warfare with yourself by looking at these couple of things. So a couple quick tips. First of all, don't look at the tax assessment. And yes, of course, the tax assessment has lots of great little pieces of info on it, but if it's gonna get into your mind because you're gonna start looking at a couple things. One, the big one that a lot of folks around here are kind of paying attention to is what the tax assessment was and what it is now. We just went through a big reeval here in January of 2024. And unfortunately, some of our buyers are seeing what the taxes used to be versus what they are now. Keep in mind, North Carolina is actually relatively conservative when it comes to cost of property taxes in comparison to a lot of other big metros like folks coming from California or New York. But that is a little bit of a hurt to your soul when you see what the previous seller was paying versus what they're paying now. Also keep in mind that sometimes that tax value can be wrong for a couple of different reasons. One, the square footage might actually not be the actual square footage. We are also seeing some of the tax assessments getting argued in court currently because they're giving a bathroom or a bedroom to the house that doesn't actually exist, or they may actually have pulled comps when they did this assessment and they're pulling in new construction into an existing neighborhood. So just understand the tax value is just a value. It is not what we use to price a home. So it really doesn't play any merit as far as what you're going to have to pay for market value. The second thing, again, don't do this to yourself. Don't look at what the seller bought the house for. People do this to themselves all the time, and it doesn't matter if they bought it in 1961 or if they bought it 2 years ago. Folks get really frustrated because they get mad that the seller only bought the house for X. The only time this is really a big deal is if the seller bought it just a couple of years ago or within that 2-year threshold, because sometimes the house is now a comp for itself, and that can get a little tricky when it comes to appraisal. Or they may have not done enough improvements between when they bought it to when they're selling it where it warrants that big jump and increase. Keep in mind, most homes, especially here in the Triangle where we see a natural organic appreciation that has continued over the last few years and even more substantially during the market we had in 2021 and 2022, 2 to 6% in appreciation happens organically. Okay, so you can imagine if Susie and Johnny bought a house in 1983, naturally that 2 to 6% keeps compounding. It's going to be more expensive today. So don't get frustrated when the seller bought the house for $21,000 and is now selling it for $650,000. It may make sense just because that's kind of the natural order of things. So the third one, and this one's also a big doozy, right? We all love to talk to each other. We love to use social media, but don't compare your home search experience to friends and family. A couple things kind of come into play here. First of all, if you're coming from a different location, and this means even within a state, coming from a different metro, it's going to be different. Also, when did they buy their house or sell their house? Was it yesterday, or was it sometime a few years ago, or was it like a decade ago? Rules change, markets change, just even like the way that people interact with each other can alter over time. So it's really hard to play that comparison. And then a few other things, location or price range, all of that competition on the table. These factors all play into how a contract comes to fruition. So when you bought your house, you have to think of all these different pieces working together that created your puzzle versus this other person where they don't have the same pieces, right? It's a totally different scenario. So when you're trying to compare apples to apples, it's really hard if you take other people's experiences as kind of just like the word that's scribed into a stone. Take it with a grain of salt and understand that you might have a similar experience, but it's never going to be the exact same. So it's really good to talk through these things with your agent and find out what types of stuff have changed, and also how does location and price range and competition in today's market make a difference in how your situation is going to play out. So, fourth one I'm going to give you, yes, I said 3 tips, but I'm going to throw one more at you just as a pro tip. Be really careful looking at third-party websites and determining value or details of a home. There are some third-party sites that give kind of a valuation, and oftentimes those are inaccurate because they're not pulling what we like to call tried and true comps, comparable homes to the home that you're trying to purchase. The other little thing that I like to kind of pay attention to is down there in the details, sometimes they'll give a flood rating or even a schools rating. There is no criterion that's at least public to say how those metrics are determined. I've actually seen homes be a 10 out of 10 in a flood rating, and it's nowhere near a flood zone. And according to FEMA, and keep in mind, they're the ones that determine this stuff, according to them, it's not even a flood hazard of any kind, nor would it warrant having flood insurance. But that's what's on the website. So you want to make sure you're double checking information. And again, like I said earlier, take everything with a grain of salt. Trust but verify. So I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. Again, we're Real Estate Elevated, and we're just here to bring you the information so you can make informed decisions in today's market. We'll see you next time.